All the football.
A judge said today an accident at a fairground at Long Melford in Suffolk in which 8 people were hurt could have been much worse. A metal bar on the ride gave way. The owner and an inspector who'd carried out a safety check just months before were both fined.
This was the aftermath of the accident when the ride called the Hellraiser came off the tracks, cars smashing into each other like a concertina. And this was one of the victims, Zoe Nolan from Sudbury. She was knocked unconscious, suffering head and leg injuries and broken ribs. She's still haunted by what happened and struggles when she's out. Even the simplest screeching noise brings it all back.
I remember the metal on metal sounds. Oh, that's this shit. Just thinking about
Even
it.
now?
Yeah, just to think, oh, it's horrible. The accident has actually turned my whole life upside down.
Today at Ipswich Crown Court, Walter Shufflebottom, who owned the ride, was fined £2,000. Independent safety examiner Frederick Meakin, who'd given the ride the all clear, and his company were fined a total of £10,000. They'd admitted safety breaches.
I mean, the purpose of a thorough examination each year is to make sure a ride is safe, and it needs to be a holistic examination of the ride. It can't just be specific parts of it, it needs to be the whole ride. And if they miss those parts, some of those parts out, clearly there's parts of the ride that aren't safe and potentially they could collapse, as they did in this case.
The judge said this wasn't a case where commercial gain had been put before safety. It was all about imperfect attention to detail.
You know, I'm not the first person it's happened to, and I just don't understand why they wouldn't want to double-check everything, especially when there's children and, you know what I mean, it just doesn't seem right.
Meakin and his company were told to pay £2,000 in costs. The total bill for the investigation is around £60,000. Kevin Birch, BBC Look East, in Suffolk.
The interim chairman of the trust which runs Colchester's 2 hospitals took up his post today after the previous one was sacked. Sir Peter Dixon takes over from Richard Bourne. He was removed by the regulator Monitor because of worries about healthcare standards. A scout leader from Norfolk who sexually abused a teenage boy has been jailed for 4 years. 37-year-old Julian Pike met his victim when he joined the Scouts at the age of 12. He abused him over 3 years on holidays and weekends away.
Look East has learned that an engineering yard had debts of tens of millions of pounds when the administrators were called in. SLP, which is based in Lowestoft, has not been paid for a huge contract in the Middle East. Hundreds of jobs are hanging in the balance.
SLP has spent the last few years rushed off its feet, building offshore platforms for customers all over the world. So it's a shock to discover the Lowestoft firm is tens of millions of pounds in debt and has called in administrators. At stake, 700 jobs in the yard itself, many more in the wider energy sector.
There are buyers that we're talking to, but it is early days. My first priority is to get the customers to commit to continuing their contracts in the yard. Then I'll be turning my attention on to trying to find a long-term buyer for the business.
SLP is being dragged down by the refusal of a customer to pay a £55 million bill for accommodation modules for an overseas oil field. Agencies have been trying to build up the energy sector on the coast, built around companies like SLP.
Critical here is really recognising that the industry will still be required to harness the gas, to harness the gas storage, to look at carbon capture, to be able to develop offshore wind, to be able to look at these elements which we're going to have to require.
Most workers are safe for now. An existing contract will keep them busy until the spring. Richard Bond, BBC Look East.
The newest prison in the region is tonight taking inmates. Bure Prison has been built on the site of the old RAF Colchester in Norfolk. It's been designed to hold more than 500 sex offenders. It's the country's 3rd specialist sex offender unit. Building work started just over a year ago. The prison will open in 2 phases.
Concern is growing about the sale of products designed to mimic illegal drugs. They're known as legal highs and are increasingly offered for sale over the counter. The death last week of a teenager who's thought to have taken them is being investigated.
They can be more expensive than the drugs they're designed to mimic, but some people are happy to pay for what appears to be legal and safe. But do they really know what they're getting?
They can't possibly know that the labelling's not accurate. Quite often the declared contents on the packets aren't actually what we find when we analyse them. The only way we can find out about the risks is to observe what happens to the people who buy them and take them. So we're effectively experimenting on the customers, and there's no other way of finding out.
I want to know what advice and information, if any, customers get. I was to get advice all right, but not quite what I'd expected. At Ali Bongo's in Norwich, I'm shown some tablets called Berry Mashed.
Obviously they're plant feeders, but I think actually these are supposed to kind of chill your plant out a bit rather than pep it up. Dusted, these are bath salts, but that's in a pouch. So why do they say that then? Because it's basically the sewers. We can't, it's legal for you to buy them, it's legal for you to own them, but we aren't qualified to advise you as to.
I wonder if selling them like this really does get round the law, not according to the MHRA, which controls the sale of medicines. It has to assess each product separately, but says many so-called legal highs are in fact unlicensed medicines.
They still have an effect on the human body. That effect is medicinal. We will then classify them as medicines, and then the whole panoply of regulations regarding medicines kicks in, and somebody is committing an offence somewhere.
Well, the shop Ali Bongo refused to give us an interview and said they had no comment. You can see the full report on Inside Out tonight at 7:30 on BBC One. Now, it's never easy running a non-league football club. First of all, you have to balance the books. Then, of course, you can lose your manager. And you know that it won't be too long before you lose your, if it's easy for me to say, before you lose your ground as well. It's all part of life at Kettering Town.
But yesterday things got a bit better. First, they were only minutes away from beating Leeds in the FA Cup. Then they were handed a dream third-round draw against Manchester United.
It's a competition that can savage reputations. Leeds took a battering at Histon last season. Now it was Kettering's turn to try and knock out the former FA Cup winners. Leading from the back was Lee Harper, the team's goalkeeper and manager. He only took over a couple of weeks ago following Mark Cooper's switch to Peterborough. And Harps was going to have a busy afternoon. Mind you, he was a spectator when Jermaine Beckford rattled the crossbar in the first half.
Hits the underside of the crossbar.
With Leeds wasting chances, the scene was set for another classic Rockingham Road Cup tie. Mind you, it might be one of the last here. The club's lease runs out soon. The fans say the local council is not doing enough to help. It received the red card from the terraces. After an hour, though, anger was not the emotion of choice. It was jubilation. Centre-back Ian Roper forward for a free kick and forward with his celebrations. One of the grand old names in English football was on the ropes. But they're not the runaway League One leaders for nothing, and they recovered to score a deserved equaliser. Nevertheless, a big upset for the Poppies. Lee Harper's side were in the draw for the third round.
I thought the team were wonderful. The town should be so proud of them.
We're in the draw, we're in the third round draw, which is fantastic.
They could have been paired with Carlisle or Coventry. Instead, the fans got the biggest of them all.
Kettering Town or Leeds United.
Manchester United at Old Trafford.
To get probably the biggest club in world football, you know, an opportunity maybe to go and play them, you know, you couldn't ask for any more. But we've got to remember that we've still got to get past Leeds United.
The draw was also kind on Peterborough, a glamour tie at Spurs for Mark Cooper, who watched his old team play.
It'd be great for our players to go in there without the pressures of the league, the Championship, to go and put a show on at Tottenham.
Elsewhere, MK Dons will welcome Premier League Burnley after edging a 7-goal thriller against Exeter. Colchester United are also through. They'll face Preston. Ipswich play Blackpool, while if Luton beat Rotherham, it's Southampton for the Hatters. But the biggest prize is Kettering's. If they beat Leeds in a replay, then it's Manchester United, a tie which could net them £500,000. Jonathan Park, BBC Look East.
Back in the